Hey everyone. Wanted to do a video here on the Boss AI that I built and just some of the details of how I got that up and running. Uh, bef- but before I go into that, I wanted to kind of show you what it stemmed from, which was the Cortana video that I made as well, where we had this Cortana doll that essentially follows the player. I wanted to kind of show you how that worked, and then that will kind of help give you a simplified version of what I eventually did with the boss. Um, so first thing is there's a couple parts to this, and like I said before in my Cortana video, this this whole thing stemmed from Bishutox's really smooth gondola. The way he set that up is he has a lead and essentially sets the lead to go at a certain rate, and then the object will then follow it. It'll like adjust its velocity to follow that lead. So really cool. It's probably something I couldn't have come up with on my own. So definitely credit to him. The other thing is uh, there's this rotational function that I was able to get. This is something that the folks over at the Scripters Guild helped me out with. Really smart people there creating really cool stuff. So first thing is I want to show you what exactly is happening. So there's a couple parts to this, but mainly you have the every 1 second here. So this is kind of the beginning of everything. Every 1 second, it's going to trigger the lead movement, which again, the lead is just a pointer that's moving around and it's telling that object where to go. And what I'm doing it with this whole thing is telling the lead to follow the player, um, and then that object will essentially adjust its velocity to follow me around. So you have, I'm just plugging in the lead and the player into this custom event, and it's going to come in here and do all these things. Keep in mind, I did create a object object variable and plugged Cortana in. The reason I did that is if I want to have this all run on a different object, I can just swap Cortana for anything else, and it will have that object then follow the lead. So that's kind of a cool way to use the object variable. But basically, the lead movement, it's pretty simple. I'm not going to go into all the math because I didn't even come up with this. This is something that Bishutox came up with. But the gist behind it all is you plug in an object list that has the lead as the first object, and then whatever you want the lead to be following or going to as the second object. And so you have here, you're grabbing that first object and that second object. You're doing some math based on their locations and the vectors and everything like that. Over here, the first thing that we're doing is setting the object position based on where the lead currently was when it came through. Um, then you're doing iteration. So this was a cool part, is this calculation it's doing is it's calculating the distance between the two objects, and then it's actually, instead of, well, it's basically creating a loop that goes through for every increment. So like if the distance is 170, it's going through 170 times and setting the object position, just boom, 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 all the way down. So it gives it that kind of smooth movement. So I also set up this. So this is something that was kind of cool, is I set up this randomizer, which made it so that the object, like in this case, the Cortana doll, will actually teleport onto wherever the lead is. So it helps if the object ends up going through a wall or something weird, it can get stuck and different things like that. And this helps so that every once in a while it'll just teleport. And so that's basically what I'm doing is I'm saying just get a random number between 1 and 200, because that seems like a reasonable frequency, and then just plug it in. So um, basically it's just comparing. So one number out of the one between 200, if it ends up matching for that increment, instead of it just moving forward, it'll teleport on top of the lead. So that's kind of what's going on there. Um, and then this object variable, that's Cortana. So um, anyway, that's the gist of it. Hopefully I went over that slow enough for anyone that wants to replicate this, but feel free to reach out to me too if you want any details. I'm going to share out the mvar file as well. So again, just actually, I think there was a part here I wanted to show as well down below. So this is the last part of it. So the first part, we have the function for the lead and getting it so it's running every so often. That's what this top part was. Now we have this is actually the moving the object, so the Cortana doll using velocity. So it's running every 0.01 second, or basically as often as it possibly can. You plug in the Cortana doll here, and then it's getting its velocity based on where the lead is, and it's doing some math and different things. And then I'm having it also trigger this custom global event, which I'll get into here next, which is, I'll zoom in a little bit, rotation look at object. And basically this is a function that you just plug in an object list. You have the object you want to be changing its rotation and the object that you want it to basically be looking at. So I put in the player there, and then there's an offset number. So this number 90 offsets it, so you can kind of get the correct orientation of the object if it's slightly off. There's another spot you can change the other direction on that, which I'll show you as well. But here, let me just run it for a second. We have our Cortana doll over here, and it's just floating. If we watch it, see how it teleported? Teleported right above me. It'll do that every so often. Otherwise, it just kind of looks at you and hovers around. But the way that we can get that to constantly be looking at the player is these rotational functions. So this is fairly simple, besides the math involved, which again I didn't create. This is the custom global event. It brings in the object that you want to have it changing, and then the object you want it looking at, does some math, plugs it into this other custom global event. And you do have some declared variables, which again, this here is what I was talking about. If you need to change the orientation of the object, I have mine at 180 right here. It helped put the Cortana doll at the right kind of rotation so that it looked like it was actually following you instead of like on its back or on its belly or anything like that. But when it calls this rotation back to rotation, it does a whole bunch of math. And again, I'll go through this slowly in case you want to copy it out. Like I said, I didn't come up with all this math. It was people at the Scripters Guild, some really cool people over there. Hopefully that was slow enough for you. But yeah, this is pretty cool. The cool thing is, if you have a map that you want to build this out on, you just create a script brain and just put all these things in. Name it the same thing, essentially duplicate it. If I can get this, converted over to the retail version, we could share it out as a prefab. So you could just basically get the shared prefab, plug it into your map, and then just add the objects that the prefab needs. But ultimately, I mean, I could just grab all four of these objects, prefab it, and then share that. So really cool. And then I'm going to come back in the boss video to show you kind of the other things I did to make this turn into a boss and have all the extra features that a boss would have. Okay, we are back into the boss map, which go ahead and start it up real quick. See, our boss came up. All right, so let's kind of break down what exactly is going on with the boss. So the first thing is I did add a little extra smoke in this hole, and I added some like lightning effects, things like that to make it a little bit ominous. I messed with all the lighting on the map, which right now I think I turned off the volumetrics, which is what made the sky really dark as well, just so it's a little easier to see. But basically what we have for the boss, I'm going to see if I can do this without dying because it's kind of weird down here. We have this auto turret, okay? So let's actually just pull that out if it'll come up. Stuck on something. These auto turrets are awesome. I was thinking really long and hard about how I could do a boss. And since the auto turret actually auto targets, whatever player's near it, it just made it a lot easier because bosses get really complicated when you also have to control what they're targeting and things like that. Not that I couldn't have figured that out eventually, it just was kind of the easier route. And I think that Glenn, who made the other boss, he actually did have his whole targeting system built out, which is really cool. I'm really impressed by what he did. So we have the auto turret, and then we have a few other objects here. So I just have this line of these, really hard to see. They're just like these little effects that are little blink, like lights. It's not blinking, but it's lights. And then you have this, I don't even know what it's called, a data pad. So let me pull that up out. So it's just this data pad that I turn sideways for its kind of face. And then this whole, there's probably an easier way to do this. Let me go in here. So Forerunner Energy Spiral in. Select that, this thing. This is kind of the whole main look of the boss right here. This spiral thing. But the cool thing is you can use really like any effects, so you could make your boss look any way you want. You just got to kind of get them all to move around together, which I'll kind of talk about here in a minute. So yeah, and these are the health things, but I'm not going to get too far into that. So also, I think the game is glitched because as soon as you run it and then the turret's on, it just likes to shoot you a bunch. But let's look at our brains here. So I already showed you guys the rotation functions. So same exact thing as what I showed with the Cortana doll. The only difference is I actually don't have anything set for this rotation because the auto turret needed a 0 instead of, I think I had 180 there on the Cortana. So I have these other boss lead, which again, it's the same thing as the lead brain that we had for the Cortana doll, but this I've added a bunch of extra things to because I wanted the boss to work in a certain way. We have our boss, which is like the main nodes and things for the boss, and kind of like with the Cortana doll, we had the function that was making the velocity of the doll move, and then we had it call the function to orient its rotation. That's all here in our boss brain. And then I also have a whole brand new brain for the boss health. And then I have another brain for spawning in this map just because I wanted spawning a certain way, and I won't go into that because you guys can, if you decide to like replicate this or something, you can use your own spawning. Let me show you this real quick before we go into the nodes. So I have a node here called boss spawn. This is, or not a node, a pointer. This is here so that I can get the boss to come up out of the hole the way that I want it to. It also lets me reset the lead, which I have here, back to this spot. So like between boss deaths or phases, I didn't want that lead to still be following the character and get stuck places or have the boss instantly spawn back on top of you. So I have it come back and reset here. There is one other thing which I'll show you. I think it's right around here under the map. So this, I just called it the dead point. The reason I have this here was so that certain things, because it's like the effect, you can't really, well, you can delete the effect in a sense. But if you want to use it again, like if you want to get rid of something but then use it again later, I just would have it hidden under the map, have it teleport down here and just hang out down here, instead of like deleting the object, because some objects, once you delete them, you can't really get it back easily or at all. I don't know if there's bugs going on with that, but so yeah, I have a dead point so I can kind of set the position of things underneath the map and get it out of the way so it's not visible. So okay, let's take a look at these nodes. So I'm actually going to go into the health one first, and the reason for that is I have a bunch of declarations up here at the top that I kind of wanted to go through. So I set some different like checks to be able to tell like what status the boss is in various different parts. So right now, like the way it probably wasn't clear in the video I put out about the boss, but I did make it so that if the boss accidentally dies without the player engaging with it, it's not going to actually drop the health down. So basically, once it detects that the player has done damage to the auto turret, it's going to change that boss engage to true, and it'll allow you to then like make its health go down when it's actually destroyed. And that's partially because I kept having it like it gets some extreme velocity and just shoot across the map and explode, things like that. Boss living is actually just a check between boss phases. So as soon as the boss, you kill the auto turret once, it's this would get set to false, and that way it's not going to do certain things during the time that it's kind of resetting itself. Boss dead, which I know is kind of confusing because it seems like the opposite of boss living, but this is actually the status of has all five parts of the health been depleted, and is the boss totally dead? And at that point I wanted it to essentially kill the boss so it doesn't spawn back in. So there's some checks on that. And then we have health 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They all have their own Boolean variable. And then we have the number of actual health. So I tried to make it in a way so that if I wanted to actually make the boss's health higher, I could, with somewhat minimal changes. However, you will see that it will require work to do more than 5. Let's come back to this part for the boss health. I'll kind of show you first the lead part. So again, this works just the way I showed you with Cortana doll, a little more complex, but basically, every 1 second we're starting the lead movement, and the first thing it's going to do is check, is the boss dead? So has the boss been totally killed off? If it has, we're not going to keep doing anything. That way the lead's not following, the boss isn't teleporting, any of that. But if the boss isn't dead, you're going to go in and essentially do the same thing. Move the lead position. Excuse me. So if the boss is dead, it actually teleports the boss and everything down to the dead point. So that's part of what I was using that for. But yeah, this part's the same. You have the lead, you have the player, and then when you get over in here, there's a couple checks that I added, but the gist of it's the same as with the Cortana doll. You're checking to see, is the boss living? So this is between phases. If it's true, it's going to go on and move the lead the way you expect. If it was false, it comes kind of down here, and it's going to reset the lead back to the boss spawn's site. It's going to wait a couple seconds, and then it's going to restart the lead movement. So everything's kind of doing all the math and everything. We have our random part that I created as well. So yeah, this is all pretty much the same. Hopefully I didn't go through that too quickly. I'll just move it here if you want to do screenshots or anything. Okay, so that's the lead movement, which again, one of the cool things we can do here. Let me just kind of show you how this works. So we're gonna just turn the boundary on the lead on. I use this a lot in my testing so that I could kind of get an idea of what was moving and how it was moving. So notice how the lead, it's not moving quite yet, but oh, I guess it is. The boss is following the lead. When it teleports, it's teleporting right on top of that lead. So if you're constantly moving, I'm dying over here because I'm stopping to look, but if you're constantly moving, you should be able to stay away from the boss and it can't teleport on top of you. But if you're standing still, that lead's going to just be sitting on top of you. So the boss could teleport onto me at any moment. You really can't get away from that lead. I think the boss killed itself, so it just reset. Yeah, so the lead's coming, and see how the lead goes through the floor, it can go through walls, and it can get the boss stuck inside things and create problems. But here's the boss right on top of me all of a sudden. Anyway, so that kind of gives you the idea of how that lead works. And if we come in here to the boss, so this is kind of the main inner workings of the boss itself. And let's take a look at this. So, all right, actually, let's come back to that part. This is the part that says, hey, let's move the boss around. So as often as we possibly can, it's gonna, as long as the boss is not completely dead, it's gonna go ahead and start moving things. And again, that's kind of the same thing. It's kind of a double check to set it back to the dead point underneath the map if the boss is dead. I have that in 2 different spots because I don't want it to, have a problem where it's still moving around when you're not expecting it to. So the first thing you're doing is setting the object velocity, and we're doing all that same math that was happening for the Cortana doll. Which is kind of this in here, but we also have a branch off of that because we use some of those same numbers up here as well. But the next thing we do is object rotation. So we're having the auto turret constantly facing the player. But then we get into basically any of the looks of the boss. You can just keep adding it on to the right here. So I'm setting the velocity and the look of the boss, but now I'm here, have that data pad, that circle on the front of the boss. We're setting that position, which is going to be right above, or like right in front of the boss. And actually, kind of cool thing that I learned along the way, you can use the object forward, which if you add its position and forward together, you're going to get essentially right in front of any object the way that it's facing. So if you wanted to have something in front of your player, you can take your player position, take the forward, and plug something in like right in front of it, and it'll be right in front of your face. So kind of cool. So then we also have the rotation of that data pad because we don't want that to be facing some odd weird direction, obviously. So we have to set the rotation of that as well. Luckily, the energies file, I didn't have to worry about the rotation of it because it's just kind of this like weird smoky blob sort of thing on top of the boss. But I just had that set position wise, basically right on top of the boss. You just have to, as you get in and adding more objects onto this thing that's moving around, you just have to be sure that you're setting them in the right way. You might have noticed that the health bar sometimes gets kind of sideways and it doesn't look like it's a straight bar from your direction, which I was trying really hard to get it to look that way. And I kind of gave up because I spent a lot of time on that trying to get the bar to always be facing you. I feel like I did a pretty good job of it, but sometimes if you turn a weird way, it'll almost have it sideways and you can't see it very well. But that's kind of the movement of the boss. You know what? Actually, let me go back up to the top part here. So here, this is the top part of the movement. Get down into the math for the velocity here. And then you get over into the actual objects there. So take screenshots if you want to rebuild it. Again, feel free to use my work as the basis of something you're doing. I'm not worried about people copying what I did here. I just want to share it out so people can make some cool stuff. So this top part is a couple of different checks. So we have on object destroyed. So every time that auto turret dies, we want it to do a certain string of things. So first thing is we're changing that living status to false, and we're changing boss engage to false, kind of just doing a reset on those. We're deleting the auto turret because we want it to then go in and respawn. Otherwise, if you don't delete it, it has like this smoking, flaming, like dead turret still following you. It's kind of weird, but and then you're going to trigger this boss damage. We have it waiting for 5 seconds in between phases. Sometimes it's even longer than that. Just like all the different things that have to happen to reset the boss, I wanted those to all kind of go through and give the player a little bit of time to like run and get a new gun or things like that in between phases. Then you're setting the boss living back because we just got it respawned. We want the boss to be living again. We're also setting the object, so we're setting the boss onto that boss spawns spot as well. So all those things there. The other thing here is on boss damaged, which again it's working with this boss engaged variable. So we're just saying if that turret gets damaged by a player, go ahead and change it to boss engaged. That way you're going to get essentially credit for the next death of the boss or that phase of it. Okay, so let's jump back over to the boss health. And this is the last section we'll look at. Not overly complicated, but because we have 5 parts of the bar of health, 5 of the little red lights, we kind of have to duplicate everything for all 5 of those. So that's kind of what's going on here. The first thing we're doing is we are setting the location of those little lights. So that's our F1, F2, F3, F4, F5. So essentially what I did here is, as often as we possibly can, first it's checking if the boss health number 1 is true. And so if I have it left to right, essentially. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking that data pad as my source location. So the data pad's already being set right, in front of the boss. So I'm using the data pad to then set the location of each of these lights. And so you have to set them slightly different for the offset so that they line up next to each other. So basically you take the position of that data pad and then the forward of it, because again, that data pad's constantly moving. It's the way it's looking. And then I just kind of did some measurements, and it's going to be 15 above the data pad, and then off, -6. The next one's -3. The next one's at 0. and so on. And the really cool thing, I don't think I've shown this much on my channel here yet, but you can grab these vectors um, and you can plug, so like, for example, if you get object forward, get object position, you're getting a, a vector 3. So you're getting 3 different locations for that, or 3 different numbers to specify where that point is in a 3D space. But you can break it up into axis values, which is cool. So I'm taking that x value and plugging it in up here and doing some math to it, and then plugging it in as the x for this other object, and so on. So pretty cool. And the other thing I'll just point out is we have the health 1, health 2, health 3, health 4. So I just did a branch on all of these all the way down. Basically just saying, like, first thing you do is check if health 1's there. Well, health 1's going to be the very last one. So if health 1's there, you go on and check if health 2's there, and so on. But like, as soon as you get, like, let's say health 5 drops off, that one's going to be set to false. You're still going to be able to, it's going to do its check all the way down the line, get to 5 and say, okay, it's false, I'm not going to keep going. Let's say you've done three damage to the boss, and so 1 and 2 are there, but 3 is not there. Then it's going to stop looking for 4 and 5 when it sees that 3 is not there, because it's just kind of like going down the line. So that was kind of a cool way to figure out how to do that. Here, let me kind of go through this slowly, zoomed in for this part. There's a lot of lines here, I understand, and so hopefully it's clear what's going where. Just keep in mind, I did use all the x values. I did math on them and plugged them into an x, y values. If I did any math, I plugged it into a y. So in this section, they're all x, y, and z all go to the corresponding x, y, z. They're not crisscrossing. So if you see the lines and you're not sure what it's plugged into, it is an x, y, or z on both ends. And I don't know if I paused up here or not. Okay, and then down here, so this is our boss damage. So as soon as you destroy the auto turret, it's going to go into the boss damage. Boss damage will then basically does the things to get rid of one of the health bars and then set the overall boss health down. So it's thinking it now has 4 or 3 or 2 health, etc. So first thing it's doing is checking if boss engage is true, because if it's not, we don't want it to actually count any damage. And then this is the same all the way down, but you have, as long as if the boss health is equal to 5, then it's going to go in and basically kill the 5 object, which is the 5th light. And then it sets the overall boss health down to 4 as well. And then it's basically, you're never going to get to, like, for example, because we're setting the boss health down to 4, next time it comes through here, it's just going to skip 5 because it's false and go on to the 4th and 3rd and all the way down. So yeah, same thing all the way down. The only thing at the very end here is you delete the last light and you actually just kill the boss. So it's dead. It's going to start setting the boss underneath the map instead of have it come out and hunt you down. So that is, I think that's everything on this. So it took me a lot of work to figure a lot of this out. I think it's cool now that people can take what I've done. You don't have to copy me. You can do your own thing, maybe just use some ideas. You could do it exactly the same and just change it up so the boss looks cooler. Anything that's a dynamic object, essentially, you can manipulate. One other thing I just realized I didn't talk about that I will here is um, these objects to move properly, they have to have a certain setting on them. So where did I put my turret at? Is it gone now? Oh, it's down here. No. So the boss turret, let me just make one, I'll show you. Gameplay sandbox. All right, so the normal turret, you go into the settings, it's set to fixed. Okay, so it's automatically dynamic, luckily on this one, but it has to be normal physics for it to like fly around and do the things that we want it to do. So that's something important. So that has to be normal physics. Take a look at this. This one's actually phased. It didn't have to be normal because you're just resetting the position and stuff. But yeah, the turrets had to be. Oh, here's our other turret. Turrets have to be normal physics. So dynamic normal on the objects you're using when it comes to like velocity and things like that. Yeah, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. Just want to say, thanks for everyone for supporting my upcoming channel here. Really excited to build some new things as retail comes out, and thanks for everyone for all the comments, support. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, I'm going to share these MBAR files, so feel free to just grab them, load them up, and use them. If not, I'm going to do my best to get this out in retail so you guys can get your hands on it, mess around with it as well. And with that, I hope you guys have a good day.